Here are the facts. In China it's called qi, and in India it's known as prana. In the West we call it the soul. But what exactly is it? To the religious, it's a spark of divinity that connects us to the universe. To the skeptics, it's a series of chemical interactions within the brain. Billions of people believe in spiritual energy, but there's no scientific proof of its existence. Finding the soul is a tricky proposition. Modern science has disproven many historical notions of this energy, but the search continues. History is filled with stories of charlatans and believers alike claiming to have discovered it. Consider the notorious experiments of Dr. Duncan McDougall in 1907, when he claimed that the soul weighed an average of 21 grams. This experiment was deeply flawed, but failure hasn't stopped us yet. In fact, some people think the search for the soul ended decades ago with a man named Wilhelm Reich. Born in 1897, Wilhelm Reich studied psychoanalysis under Sigmund Freud. Freud's theory on the libido fascinated Reich, who believed that the libido was a real physical energy. He moved to the US, where he began research on this energy. He called it Orgone. According to Reich, this energy permeated the universe, and orgone imbalances could create health problems. Reich claimed orgone treatment could combat cancer. His ideas eventually caught the government's attention. According to declassified FBI files, Reich was under investigation for ties to the Communist Party. In 1947, the agency concluded that Dr. Reich was not a communist agent and did not believe his research was subversive. Then the FDA began to persecute Reich, suing him in 1954 to place an injunction on the shipment of orgone-related devices and literature. He was arrested that same year. According to skeptics, Reich was locked up for making false claims and distributing what amounted to snake oil, but others don't buy that story. Here's where it gets crazy. While mainstream historians believe the feds prosecuted Reich for alleged communist ties, his supporters paint a different picture. These theorists say Reich was singled out because his orgone accumulators worked. He did not request payment when treating people, and he held demonstrations to prove the effectiveness of the technology, chiefly focusing on the orgone chamber. These boxes are made from layers of wood, wool, and metals. According to Reich, they concentrate ambient orgone energy, which can cure physical ailments. Reich also used orgone to operate his cloudbuster, which he claimed could manipulate cloud cover. Archived newspaper articles report the cloudbuster's alleged success. So if orgone is real and potentially beneficial, why did the government crush Reich? Most theorists believe factions in the government and the medical industry repressed Reich's work because it threatened the status quo. Other theorists believe President Eisenhower enlisted Reich in a covert war against extraterrestrials and that the arrangement soured. Both of these groups are short on proof and resort to rumors, but the FDA's actions are suspicious. After stalling transportation of the device, the agency collected Reich's literature and burned it in incinerators. Reich died of heart failure in prison in 1957. Today, he's a controversial figure, on the fringes of psychology and at the heart of conspiracy theories. Which image is closer to the truth? Was Wilhelm Reich hounded for being a snake oil salesman? Or was he jailed for discovering something they don't want you to know?
The Cloudbuster. So, we wrote him a letter, asking for his help. The offer was simple: money for rent. Reich arrived with his son, Peter. He promised his reign within 24 hours. I remember asking him how it worked. He said kind of like a lightning rod, using an energy he called Orgone. I only found out later why the men from the government were watching him. If anything, I remember the air getting drier, but I didn't doubt him. Reich had a confidence that stuck to you. Everybody simply waited, passing time, hoping the strange machine would work. That machine sure did something. And that was the last I ever saw of Wilhelm Reich.
In the 1930s, Dr. Wilhelm Reich, a prominent Austrian physician and psychoanalyst, discovered a powerful new physical energy, and for the next 2 decades, devoted his life to the investigation of its laws and properties. He confirmed the existence of this energy in the human body, verified its presence in the atmosphere, developed instrumentation to observe and collect it, and harnessed it for a variety of purposes, from cancer treatment to motor power to weather experimentation. Reich called his discovery Orgone energy. But tragically, it was a discovery that the world was not ready for. Wilhelm Reich was born in 1897 in Galicia, the easternmost part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, now the Ukraine. He grew up in Bukovina on a large farm operated by his father. Until he was 13 years old, Reich was educated at home by tutors. His mother, to whom he was devoted, committed suicide in 1910 after his father discovered she had had a brief affair with one of the tutors. His father died 4 years later from tuberculosis. That same year, 1914, the First World War broke out. Within days, Russian troops swept through Bukovina. Reich narrowly escaped being sent to Russia as a hostage and had to flee his home. Later he wrote, "I never saw either my homeland or my possessions again. Of a well-to-do past, nothing was left." For the next 4 years, Reich served in the Austrian army, experiencing what he called the war as a machine. In 1918, the war finally ended. Germany and Austria were defeated. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was broken up, and Bukovina became a part of Romania. Alone, homeless, and intellectually starved after 4 years of war, Reich entered the medical school at the University of Vienna. Reich's recognition of the significance of sexuality drew him to the work of Dr. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Soon he was considered one of Freud's most promising students. Freud had discovered that neuroses are caused by the conflict between natural sexual instincts and the social denial and frustration of those instincts. Freud had also hypothesized the existence of a biological sexual energy in the body. He called it libido, and described it as something which is capable of increase, decrease, displacement, and discharge, and which extends itself over the memory traces of an idea like an electric charge over the surface of the body. But as the years passed, Freud and his followers diluted much of this concept, reducing the libido to little more than a psychological energy or idea. By 1925, Freud had concluded that the libido theory may therefore, for the present, be pursued only by the path of speculation. Reich's clinical observations, however, demonstrated that sexual energy was more than just an idea, and that sexual satisfaction, in fact, alleviated neurotic symptoms. He discovered that the function of the orgasm is to maintain an energy equilibrium by discharging excess biological energy that builds up naturally in the body. If that discharge function is disturbed, as it proved to be in all his patients, this energy continues to build up without adequate release, stagnating and fueling neurotic disorders. Reich's orgasm theory set him apart from his colleagues because it indicated that the libido was a real physical energy that possibly might be measured quantitatively. His clinical work also led to new therapeutic techniques designed to discover and eliminate any impediments to the flow and discharge of this energy. But the widespread existence of human misery forced Reich to conclude that the solution to the problem of neuroses was not treatment, it was prevention. "You have to revamp your whole way of thinking," said Reich. so that you don't think from the standpoint of the state and the culture, but from the standpoint of what people need and what they suffer from. Then you arrange your social institutions accordingly. Freud, on the other hand, maintained that culture takes precedence, that sexual instincts must be adapted to the existing social structure. These conflicting positions led to an eventual break between Reich and Freud. In Vienna and later in Berlin, Reich devoted much of his time and money educating working-class people about the essential role of sexuality in their lives. "I had 6 clinics in Vienna," said Reich, "where people came and received advice once or twice a week. To provide medical and educational help was its purpose." To reach the greatest number of people, he worked within the socialist and communist parties to promote sex education, birth control, divorce rights, and better housing. Reich recalled that in Berlin, there were about 50,000 people in my organization in the first year. Reich was also very outspoken about Germany's turbulent political climate. Unlike most members of the Berlin Psychoanalytic Association, Reich openly opposed the rise of the Nazi Party. But his activities exacted a high price. He was denounced by the communists and expelled from the International Psychoanalytic Association, calling these events catastrophes which threaten my personal, professional, and social existence. When asked what he would do, Reich replied, "Just go on." University of Oslo, 1935. While continuing to teach and develop his innovative therapeutic techniques, Reich began a series of laboratory experiments to verify the existence of a physical, biological energy expressed in the emotions. Using human subjects, Reich was able to demonstrate a charge at the skin surface directly related to feelings of pleasure or anxiety. The charge would increase when a subject experienced pleasure and decrease during feelings of unpleasure. From this, Reich concluded that pleasure is the movement of biological energy toward the periphery of the organism, while anxiety is the movement of this energy toward the center. He assumed this energy to be electrical. But was it? And did similar energy processes exist in more basic life forms? Reich discovered that under certain conditions, sterilized and unsterilized substances, such as grass, blood, sand, charcoal, and foodstuffs, disintegrate into pulsating vesicles that exhibit a bluish color. He called these vesicles bions. Reich observed internal motility in the bions, an effect of energy. He also found that certain bions revealed a strong radiation phenomenon, seen here as a white field around the organism, and that these bions could kill bacteria and cancer cells. This radiation confirmed the existence of an energy that did not obey any known laws of electricity or magnetism. Reich called this energy Orgone, because its discovery had evolved from his investigation of the orgasm function, and because this energy could charge organic matter. When he published his findings, the scientific and psychiatric communities responded with a vicious year-long attack in the Norwegian press. In the wake of this response, and the inevitability of a Second World War, Reich began to look to America as the future home for his work. In August 1939, Reich sailed for America on the last ship to leave Norway before World War II broke out. Reich settled in the Forest Hill section of New York City. He taught at the New School for Social Research in Manhattan. Published his books in English. Trained American physicians in his therapeutic techniques. And pursued his investigations of orgone energy. Since the energy appeared to be everywhere and to permeate all substances, Reich had to find ways to isolate and collect it in order to study its functions and make it usable. Experiments demonstrated that organic or non-metallic materials, such as cotton, wool, or plastic, attract, absorb, and hold the energy. Metallic materials, steel or iron, attract the energy and quickly reflect it in both directions. On the basis of these experiments, Reich constructed small boxes with alternating layers of organic and metallic materials, with the inner walls lined with metal. The organic layers attract the atmospheric orgone energy, which is then directed inward by the metal layers. Any energy reflected outward by the metal layers is reabsorbed by the organic material, attracted back to the metal and directed toward the inside of the box. The result, a higher concentration of orgone energy inside the box. The more layers, the higher the concentration. This accumulation of energy can be verified in a variety of ways. For example, a constant temperature difference exists between the air above the box and in the surrounding air, contradicting the second law of thermodynamics. There also exists a slower electroscopic discharge rate in the higher orgone concentration within the box. These layered boxes, known as orgone energy accumulators, became a valuable tool in Reich's scientific and medical research. Initially, they were used to observe visual manifestations of orgone energy within the enclosure and to test the effects of orgone radiation on cancer mice. Because his results with cancer mice were so promising, Reich decided to test the effects of orgone radiation on human subjects. He constructed orgone energy accumulators that were large enough for a person to sit in, and in 1942, he began experimental treatments with cancer patients. They were all terminal cases. Reich promised no cure and charged no money. Over a period of time, the patients showed marked improvement, relief of pain, healthier blood condition, weight gain, and the shrinkage and elimination of tumors. Despite these positive results, the patients died, reinforcing Reich's conviction that cancer is a bioenergetic shrinking following emotional resignation, and that the tumors themselves are not the disease, but merely a local manifestation of a deeper systemic disorder. Once again, Reich's focus became prevention. Reich also discovered that water and high humidity absorb and hold orgone energy, making it difficult to carry out experimental work in New York City during the summer. In 1940, on a camping trip to New England, Reich discovered the Rangeley Lakes region in Maine. With its low humidity and clean air, it provided an ideal environment for his work. In 1942, Reich purchased an old farm bordering on a small lake. He called it Orgone and envisioned it as a permanent home for the various branches of his work. In 1945, a student's laboratory was built. Three years later, construction began on an orgone energy observatory, which included additional laboratory facilities, Reich's study and library, and outdoor observation decks. Funding for these buildings and for Reich's research came exclusively from his own income as a physician and teacher, and from loans and contributions by students. By 1947, after less than 8 years in America, Reich's work was attracting considerable interest as Orgone research expanded into new areas of psychiatry, medicine, and biophysics. One of Reich's most significant new developments was the discovery of a motor force in Orgone energy that had enormous practical implications. Here, Reich demonstrates a small motor being propelled by Orgone energy from the body. And here, motor power is provided by Orgone energy harnessed from the atmosphere. With the development of Orgone, Reich's dream of a home for his work was slowly becoming a reality. Sadly, it was a dream that he would not see fulfilled. In 1947, this article, written by freelance journalist Mildred Brady, appeared in New Republic magazine. It was filled with distortions and innuendos about Reich's sexual theories and Orgone research. Brady's most inflammatory claim was that Reich was building accumulators of Orgone energy which are rented out to patients who presumably derive orgastic potency from it. Implying that Reich was a danger to the public, Brady challenged the medical authorities to take action against him. 2 months later, the article was brought to the attention of the Federal Food and Drug Administration. The result was a 10-year campaign by the FDA designed to destroy Reich's work. The FDA focused on the Orgone energy accumulator, which Reich and other physicians were using experimentally with patients. Convinced that the accumulator was being fraudulently promoted as a sexual and medical device, FDA agents spent years interviewing Reich's associates, physicians, students, and patients, looking for dissatisfied accumulator users. None were ever found. As the FDA attack continued, so did Reich's work. He continued to develop new ways to visualize, measure, and harness Orgone energy from the atmosphere. The Cloudbuster, for example, was an experimental instrument that could affect weather patterns by altering concentrations of Orgone energy in the atmosphere. A set of hollow metal pipes and cables inserted into water creates a stronger Orgone energy system than that in the surrounding atmosphere. Water, which strongly attracts and absorbs Orgone, draws the atmospheric energy through the pipes. This movement of Orgone from a lower to a higher energy system was used by Reich to create clouds and to dissipate them. In 1953, during a long drought that threatened the Maine blueberry crop, several farmers offered to pay Reich if he could bring rain to the parched region. The Weather Bureau had forecast no rain for several days when Reich began his cloud-busting operations. 10 hours later, a light rain began to fall. Over the next few days, close to 2 inches fell. The blueberry crop was saved. In February 1954, the FDA filed a complaint for injunction against Reich in the federal court in Portland, Maine. The complaint declared that Orgone energy does not exist. It asked the court to prohibit the shipment of accumulators in interstate commerce and to ban Reich's published literature, which they claim was labeling for the accumulators. Reich responded to the complaint with a lengthy letter to Judge John Clifford, explaining that he could not appear in court since doing so would allow a court of law to judge basic scientific research. Scientific matters, he wrote, can only be clarified by prolonged, faithful, bona fide observations in friendly exchange of opinion, never by litigation. I therefore submit, in the name of truth and justice, that I shall not appear in court. Judge Clifford did not accept Reich's letter as a valid legal response, and the injunction was issued on default, as if Reich had never responded at all. But the injunction was even more excessive than the initial complaint. It ordered that all Orgone energy accumulators and their parts were to be destroyed. It ordered all materials containing instructions for the use of the accumulator to be destroyed as well. It also banned a list of Reich's books containing statements about Orgone energy, until such time as all references to Orgone energy were deleted. After the initial shock, Reich continued his work, traveling to Arizona to experiment with the cloudbuster in the dry desert environment. While he was there, and without his knowledge, one of Reich's students, Dr. Michael Silvert, moved a truckload of accumulators and books from Rangeley, Maine to New York City, a direct violation of the injunction. As a result, the FDA charged Reich and Silvert with criminal contempt of court. In 1956, both men were found guilty. Reich was sentenced to 2 years in a federal prison. While Reich appealed his sentence, the government carried out the destruction of accumulators and literature. In New York City, several tons of Reich's books and other publications were burned in one of the city's garbage incinerators, including titles that were only to have been banned. This destruction of literature constitutes one of the most heinous acts of censorship in United States history. All appeals denied, on March 11, 1957, 2 weeks shy of his 60th birthday, Wilhelm Reich was imprisoned at the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. He died there of heart failure 8 months later, on November 3, 1957, and was buried at Orgone.
In the 1940s, an Austrian immigrant to America and refugee from Nazi Germany, Dr. Wilhelm Reich, made the scientific discovery of a previously unknown energy existing in the atmosphere, in space, and within living organisms. Discovered accidentally, Dr. Reich eventually demonstrated this blue glowing energy to charge up and radiate from microorganisms, plants, animals, and humans. This energy also existed in a free form within the open atmosphere and in high vacuum. He called this energy the Orgone. Orgone energy, as Dr. Reich discovered, was synonymous with life energy, long postulated by scientists and accepted as fact by ordinary people from around the world. Orgone energy could be gathered in its free form directly from the atmosphere using a device he later called the Orgone energy accumulator. A simple enclosure resembling a large hollow capacitor, composed of alternating layers of special insulators and conductors. The Orgone accumulator allowed a high charge of the Orgone to collect inside itself, facilitating its direct study and revealing many of its properties. Dr. Reich observed the Orgone energy charge in the human biosystem was expressed in emotion and sexuality and could be measured bioelectrically. A person's overall vitality and aliveness was a function of human and atmospheric Orgone charge and pulsation, and this could often be increased by sitting inside the Orgone accumulator. Orgone charge of the tissues was a fundamental component of the immune system, as revealed in the bioelectric charging of red blood cells. The orgone accumulator was found to boost the immune system of people who sat inside them for periods of approximately 30 minutes a day over many days, and to thereby promote health and reduce the symptoms of some diseases. So incredible were the healing effects of the orgone accumulator that Dr. Theodore Wolff, a pioneer in psychosomatic medicine and associate of Dr. Reich, called the orgone accumulator the most important discovery in the history of medicine, bar none. Another German physician has stated, "Failure to use the orgone accumulator in the treatment of severe burns constitutes medical malpractice." Dr. Reich observed the orgone energy had a blue color, and he reasoned the Earth was surrounded by an envelope of blue glowing orgone energy. He observed the streaming of protoplasm in the cells, and movements of smooth muscle tissue bore a resemblance and functional similarity to the movements of streaming cloud patterns and to the illuminating an animal-like aurora phenomenon. This was years before high-altitude aircraft discovered the atmospheric jet streams, and more than a decade before the astronauts returned color photos of the Earth's blue-glowing atmosphere. Dr. Reich reasoned that both the hurricanes and galaxies were created and put into motion by superimposing streams of orgone energy in a cosmic dance similar to the sexual attraction between male and female. He demonstrated the existence of orgone energy in deep vacuum tubes, which also glowed blue when charged up inside orgone energy accumulators. The orgone energy filled all space, he argued, satisfying many of the descriptions of the older cosmological ether of space, or what modern astronomy confusedly calls dark matter, and which is identified as an anomalous blue-glowing halo surrounding galaxies. Even more controversial, Dr. Reich developed a method to run small motors with the orgone energy. He also developed orgone energy devices for affecting the atmospheric orgone and clouds to bring rains during droughts or even into large deserts. Dr. Reich demonstrated the same life energy or orgone energy in a number of carefully controlled experiments, too much to report in this short video, which allow us to make these short summary statements with reasonable scientific certainty. His publications on these subjects presented very positive results from his experimental work, but this only added to the hysterical outrage of his critics. They slandered his early research on human sexuality, called the orgone accumulator a sex box, and subjected Dr. Reich and his associates to character assassination and slander. Dr. Reich's work and ideas were chronically misrepresented in popular newspaper and magazine smear articles. Fraudulent information and outright lies, and without investigating his work in any serious manner, the medical establishment encouraged the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to seek and obtain a court injunction to stop Dr. Reich's research, writing, and speaking about his discovery. In a legal case which has far greater significance to American freedoms and the U.S. Constitution than the better-known Scopes monkey trial, Dr. Reich was finally charged with contempt of court for the technical violation of an obscure cosmetic labeling law. He and an associate, Dr. Michael Silvert, were sent to prison, and Dr. Reich's books and research journals were ordered banned from interstate commerce, and existing copies were burned in New York City incinerators. Dr. Reich died in prison in 1957, while Dr. Silvert committed suicide shortly after his release. Victims of a left-wing smear campaign merged with organized big medicine and pharmaceutical interests. Fortunately, most of Dr. Reich's books survived and were republished. Newly republished editions of his writings are available from bookstores and internet catalogs in many different languages from all around the world. Since the 1960s, an entire new generation of scientists and physicians have investigated Dr. Reich's work, reproducing his experiments, applying them clinically, and finding them to be sound and the discovery of the orgone energy to be authentic. In particular, Dr. James DeMeo, a former university professor who was blacklisted and punished for his positive interests in Reich, has several books on this subject which are available. The Orgone Accumulator Handbook by Dr. DeMeo provides concise instructions on how to build and safely use the orgone energy accumulator, following Dr. Reich's original guidelines and methods. This small but information-packed book contains many photos, diagrams, a scientific bibliography, and resource guide. Another book edited by Dr. DeMeo, entitled Heretic's Notebook, presents the results of new experiments by many different scientists of the younger generation, proving and expanding upon the scientific substance of Dr. Reich's discovery. It also addresses questions of historical significance on related concepts, such as the cosmic ether of space, which always had positive evidence to support it, in spite of many distortions in the textbooks. These books, and others like them, are important for anyone interested in Dr. Reich's discoveries, which constitute a breakthrough and authentic revolution in the sciences. They are a part of the censored science of the 20th century, which are expunged from textbooks and about which the mainstream news media refuses to accurately report. You are encouraged to get these books and educate yourself.
Now, what we'd like to do is, our next guest is Colin. Now, we got sent an email off one of our listeners of this YouTube video of this guy driving around Ireland, putting these, what we found out to be orgonite stones around telephone masts around Ireland. And we fondly, because we didn't know who he was, we fondly called him Orgonite Man. Like, not Superman, but Orgonite Man. And so we said, we put out the message, and our regular listeners now, we put the message out and said, if anybody can find out who this guy is, we'd like to get him on the show and talk to him and find out what he's doing and what orgonite is, because we didn't know anything about it. So, and lo and behold, we did manage to get in touch with Colin. So, good evening, Colin. How are you doing?
Good evening.
Good evening. Now, Colin, this orgonite thing, I've never heard of it before until I got this email from our listeners. And I found it quite interesting and fascinating because, as I said to you just while we're taking a break there, there's a mobile phone mast probably about 300 or 400 yards away from my house, and there's one not too far away from where Steve is. And if this orgonite does what it says on the tin, I'll be getting a few stones off you because, you know, anything to reduce the effects of a mobile phone mast is always a good thing. But before we go down that road, tell us about yourself, how you got involved with it, and, you know, and obviously tell us about orgonite.
Well, how I got involved, how I found out about it is I started noticing chemtrails ago, and I kind of wanted to see was there a way of I just started looking up on the internet about chemtrails, and I seen there was someone claiming to be able to dissolve chemtrails with this device he had in his garden, and this device was orgonite, and it cost about €150 to make it. So I just said I'd take the chance to make the it's called a chembuster for dispersing chemtrails. So I danced and I made it, and the very first day I made it, I put it out in the garden. The chemtrails were dissolving, and a helicopter came and had a very low flight by right over my house, which really scared me at the beginning because I couldn't understand why that would have happened, you know, how they would know about that I had the device or what was going on at that time. I kind of know a bit more about it now.
Well, would that just be a coincidence?
Yeah, well, I thought that, but I actually went away to Cap, and then 2 weeks later, and I had the device with me. I went into the middle of nowhere where there's a place I go sometimes is kind of a place I go to have a retreat and stuff. And I brought it with me and I put it out, and within 20 minutes there was another helicopter flew straight over again, very similar to the one that flew over me originally. You know, which could be a coincidence. Like, I wouldn't use the helicopters as a way of proving Orgone works or anything like that, because anything can be a coincidence. But the effect it had on the chemtrails, dissolving the chemtrails and creating a blue sky, was the thing that kind of got me hooked on it.